Hey, what's going on? Nick Unsworth here, and I'm a kick-ass business coach, and I'm on an absolute mission to help you find your purpose in life, to help you love what you do for work every single day, to help you be the rock star that you are meant to be, to make more money than you ever thought was possible, and to have more time freedom so you can actually enjoy the life that you're living. I'm here to help you set your life on fire. Hey, what's going on? Nick Unsworth here, and you're about to watch a never-before-seen keynote with Gary Vaynerchuk, New York Times best-selling author Gary Vaynerchuk, and this guy runs a 350-plus person employee company. So if you haven't checked it out too, we actually have a behind-the-scenes couple episodes where I flew to New York, I flew a film crew out there, and we just snaked around his office and got to get some really great information about social media marketing and what was coming up. And so before we dive into this episode, I want you to know that we invested in Gary, right? But we didn't just invest in Gary, we invested in you guys, right? So we spent over $30,000. We bought 2,230 books from Gary. Physical books, jab, 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 right hook. It's amazing. If you want one, you can just reach out to us and just message me, ask me. We've got hundreds more to give away. And what's so cool is that we did that for a couple reasons. First and foremost, we did it because we knew that this is going to be the rocket fuel that grows this podcast. So this is a really big moment for us, and I want to ask your help that as you watch this and take note, and this guy is just so brilliant, we'd love for you to share it. Share it with your friends. Definitely write us a great review. That would be awesome. But we did it because we want to grow our audience. We want this podcast to be #1 in video. And so that's one reason. The other reason it's great for branding. You know, I knew that when I started this company, Life on Fire, I want to be positioned near people like Gary, right? It's a great way to grow our networking, to elevate our brand. So when we ran ads on Facebook and put my head next to Gary's, a lot of cool things happened, right? Other people started to think of me in a different way. It elevated our coaching programs and different things. So it was a cool branding by association, as I call it. So anytime you're building a business or a brand, look for ways that you can partner up or you can brand by association. And the other thing is that, you know, we had all these physical books. You know, this was also serves as the rollout, those physical books for what we have, which is called Page Burner. So we actually, last month, we rolled it out. Everyone got a really cool black box in the mail with Gary's book, a letter from Gary, a $5 little gift, cool stuff. So the whole purpose of this is to add as much value as we can for you. So grab your notebook, grab a pen. This is going to be a rocking episode, and just buckle in. There's so many cool things to come in this episode. So hope you enjoy.
So excited to go pick up Gary Vaynerchuk right now. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to say. Hi. How are you? Hi. Here's Gary V. Picking him up.
So we are very fortunate to have Gary Vaynerchuk joining us here today. Everyone get to your feet, give him a big hello, and welcome Gary V. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been in Vegas for 4 days, so I'm going to take a chair because I'm really f***ing tired. You know, I was talking to the guys and gals of this event, and I actually think, given the size of the room and the fact that, you know, especially if we close all the doors, I think I may go into heavy Q&A, because my concern is, I mean, listen, I'll talk the whole time if you want me to, but my concern is that I've been thinking a lot. So let me start with this opening statement. I actually think all of business, actually all of life, is completely predicated on providing value, right? That, you know, if you don't provide value, like, I don't give a f*** if you're the best marketer of all time. If your product sucks, you're going to lose. Like, you can do everything great and have every tactic right and know how to do social perfectly and have the greatest landing page conversion funnel you've ever seen and SEO your face off and all that stuff. But if when it gets to that point, you are unable to build retention or word of mouth of scale of the network effect of the quality of what you're selling, you cannot build a real business. You will ultimately tap out or /fail. And so my whole life has been predicated on the fact that I think about how do I bring the most value possible for whatever I do. When my life took me into a place where my career was predicated on selling wine, I wanted to sell it for the lowest price possible, have the best possible customer service, recommend the best new wines that I possibly could, because that was how I could provide value. When I write books or speak, I always think about how can I just give everything away? I don't want to sell anything. I want to give as much possible as knowledge as I can, because it becomes leverage to anything I may want to have long term. See, I'm very, very predicated on running a marathon in a world that I think is running a sprint. I think when we think about 2014, and when I think about the entrepreneurs in this room and marketers and the brands that I work with, we live in a world where people lack patience. We just don't have patience. And I promise you that if you're able to, whether it's financially or emotionally, put yourself in a position to have patience, you have a far better chance of succeeding. Your decision-making path becomes far clearer, and you build much more leverage to actually build wealth or work-life balance or legacy or whatever makes you tick. So, you know, speaking of that, how the hell I got on that rant, I put out a ton of content, right? I write books, I put out tons of videos online, I speak all the time. So when I think about sitting in this room, I can talk about a lot of things that you've heard from me before. I could talk about a lot of things that you could go into your hotel room or your house later and watch online and get the same content. What I'd much rather do is get dramatically more specific to anything that I can answer. So let me ask this question, and then off that question, I'll decide how much I want to spiel and how much I want a Q&A. How many of you in this room feel like you have some sort of grasp of me and the things that I believe in and or talk about? Raise your hand. And how many do not? Okay. Well, you guys. So for the hands that went up, I'll go very quickly, and then since the majority does know, I do want to kind of go into specifics. I'm a storyteller. If you ask me what I am, when I met my wife in 2003, long before storytelling became an attractive word, I asked her that when I died, that's what I wanted it to say, right after the family stuff. I believe in stories tremendously. I think that when you think about how things sell, how things are sold, they're sold by stories. They're sold by stories that either the brand created or stories that other people created. And so stories really matter. The way you feel when you wear the products that you wear are predicated on storytelling. You know, they represent who you are. The reason you believe it represents who you are is because stories were told of what that represents to society. So I think it's very important to understand that if you're selling concrete, that you need to understand your story. That even the most basic, non-interesting things, your story may not be predicated on your product. Your story may be predicated on how you got to your product. Or, my story is very predicated on the fact that I was born in the Soviet Union, that I immigrated to the US, that I didn't grow up with much, that I sold lemonade and baseball cards, that I fell in love with wine. Storytelling really matters. I'm a storyteller, so that's the context there. I kind of gave you a little bit of my backstory a little bit there. I eventually fell in love with wine. I can tell you that all of my business success is actually predicated on, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I've come to realize I actually suck crap at almost everything, right? That I was a DNF student. I'm a really poor student, which means I'm not organized, and I don't like to do like the fine details, which matter, because execution matters, but I don't like that. Luckily for me, most people are good at that. It's actually a commodity, so I can surround myself with that all day long. But it matters. But what I'm good at, and I don't know how many people here are baseball fans? Just raise your hands. Okay, so Mariano Rivera is a baseball player. He just retired. He was the closer of the New York Yankees for 15, 20 years. The guy had one pitch. The guy basically, I mean, he had a couple, but he had one specific pitch that nobody figured out how to hit for 18 years, and he's gonna go down as one of the best pitchers of all time. I really think that that's what I'm about. There's only one thing I'm really good at, which is the understanding of the psychology of the end consumer of what they're gonna buy before they think they're gonna buy it. That's it, that's all I got. In 1996, without owning a computer, without being techie in my whole life, in 1996, I launched a .com website for my family's liquor store business called winelibrary.com. Only because I believed, even though everybody told me in 1994 and 5 that they would never put their credit card into a computer, that nobody would ever buy wine on the internet, on this information superhighway, because that's what we called it. Even that all that happened, I believed. Even though everybody said that YouTube was stupid and wasn't gonna mean anything, in 2006 when it came out, within months I started a wine show on YouTube called Wine Library TV, which started the process of me becoming internet famous. I believed YouTube was gonna really matter, that it wasn't just gonna be random videos of cats falling off trees or people putting Mentos in Pepsi and it exploding. I didn't think it was just gonna be 10-year-old kids watching it. And that's what played out. And in 2007, when everybody, even in the tech world, said Twitter was the dumbest shit ever, I didn't. And I put 10 hours a day into building a community there and established my presence there and leveraged that to a lot of the things that most of you even know me for. So what I spend a lot of time on is understanding what's about to happen based on what I believe, because I think that we trick ourselves in our own brains. We say we're not gonna do things that I know we're going to. For example, by show of hands, how many of you in this room said that you were never going to have a Facebook account 5 or 6 years ago? Raise your hand. And of those 20 people, how many of you do have a Facebook account? Exactly. And that plays over and over. Tons of people here are like, I'm never getting on that Snapchat, and then they get on that Snapchat, right? And that happens over and over and over again. So establishing that, the thing I wanna really talk to you guys about is what you're selling for a living. I really wanna challenge everybody in this room, more than anything else, to understand that what the internet's really doing, what social networks are really doing, is it's bringing full transparency to our society. And that every person in this room, let me make a statement to you that I think you'll find humorous. It is my firm belief that 80% of the people's great-grandfathers in this room were racists, right? But it is lost in history. All the dumb shit that your great-grandparents did is gone, lost in history. Everything you think and act on is now being documented because we are more and more documenting our thoughts, putting out pictures, talking about our things. I implore everybody in this room to really think for 30 seconds now, not about the next 3 months or 6 months, but are you gonna feel phenomenal telling your grandkids about what you did for a living and how you rolled as a human being and how you made your money? Because I promise you, if you don't, you're gonna lose a very big game. You know that girl the other day that tweeted out that thing when she was going to Africa and it took over Twitter and the internet? How many people are familiar with what I'm talking about, the Rocco incident? Not one more time, raise your hands, because not as many as I thought. Okay, so the day before Christmas, for the majority of this room that doesn't know about this, a woman, a PR gal at a company, IAC in New York, was heading to Africa on her holiday trip and made a completely ludicrous statement on Twitter. I don't even want to, it's so uncomfortable. I feel, and I curse my ass off and I feel uncomfortable repeating it, but it was completely ridiculous. And everybody's like, you know, and you should really look it up. I think it's, I think her last name's Rocco. Justine Rocco, I think is the name exactly, but you should be able to find it pretty easily. And everybody's talking about like, oh, and she got fired. By the way, she tweeted it. Here's why it took off. Plenty of people tweet dumb shit. Here's why. She tweeted it right before she got on the plane for 14 hours. And it got viral while she was still in the air. As a matter of fact, it was insane. If you Googled her name the last 4 hours of her flight, if you Googled her name, Google results showed the tracking of the flight. They did. It was insane. It was insane. Anyway, there was a picture tweeted at Cape Town of like 50 reporters there waiting for her when she landed. And so it was the sensationalism. And by the way, this exploded on Twitter. It shows the lowest common denominator of us as human beings being thrilled about somebody's demise. But it wasn't really that. It was that it wasn't done. It was still playing out, right? It's like the O.J. chase. That's what, it wasn't over yet. We didn't know what was gonna happen. Anyway, everybody talks about like, oh, you know, don't tweet bad things, you'll get fired. And I sit there and I'm like, fired? That's the last problem she has. This is basically the legacy of this 30-year-old woman's life forever. And so I think I want to start very high, and then we'll go low, because your questions, we can get into details. And please, I don't want to go philosophical. I want to get into the business aspects. But the business aspects matter to the overall concept, which is we have to make smart decisions. When looking for money, because let's not forget why we're here. I mean, unless I'm confused, we're under the context of commerce and business in this room, which, oh, by the way, the scorecard in that is money. When looking for money, when you're looking for it, you are willing to make decisions that don't feel good in lieu of it because you want it so bad. And so if you're able to somehow position yourself not to need it right this second, I promise you, you have a far better chance of getting it, and more importantly, a far better chance of getting it and feeling good about how you got it. And so, you know, for me, the theme is patience. You know, no matter what you're doing here, please understand that 36 months from now is not that long. It's not, I mean, I met this nice kid back there, he's 17, he's like, you know, can you give me some advice? I'm like, if you do everything wrong for the next 5 years, you're still gonna be young as and you can pick it up and keep going, right? Like, if you literally do everything wrong, and that to me is the point of it all, right? Which is that, I don't know, I spend a lot of time traveling and consulting and building my own businesses, and I'm in rooms like this quite a bit, and I understand, and I'm massively concerned because of the lack of patience, which then gets into decision-making that I think is suspect at best. That's me being polite, right? And I think people are writing their legacies, and I highly implore you that you don't want to lose the leverage of your name as a human being tarnished, because in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now, in a world of Google Glass, it's not just what people have on your reputation in the first result on Google. People are gonna roll up on you in real life and have every piece of information at their fingertip or maybe their eye tip. And if those results don't feel good, and if people are questioning your moral status and those kind of things, you are going to be in trouble. So, I'm starting with that. Because that's the single most important thing. Because if you get that wrong, nothing else will work. Now, the other thing I'm paying a lot of attention to because of the internet, social networks, what have you, is where do people actually pay attention? Like, what's really actually happening? Because we're living through a huge shift. People's eyeballs and ears, and ultimately their attention, are shifting. See, we have a very broken business culture in America right now. It's all about scale. How many followers do you have? How many impressions did it get? How many people are on your email list? Wrong game. Wrong game. The right game is how many care and how many convert, right? And so when people are thinking about top line numbers, they're not thinking about the bottom line execution. And so what's wrong on social right now is a lot of people are putting out stuff and they care about the overall reach and how many people, and that's important. You have to have an at-bat. But if you're not understanding the conversion, you're gonna lose. And so the reason I wrote this last book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, it stands for give, 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 and then ask. I implore everybody to think about when they're putting out, and I have no idea what you do for a living, and we'll get into that in a second, but if you're putting out an email, or a tweet, or a Facebook status update, or an ad, no matter what you're doing, when you are talking to the world, if you do not leverage the fact by giving people up front, you then are in a leverage point of the ask. If you do not understand that mechanic, you will lose, because we have a supply and demand issue. Understand, we have a supply and demand issue on information. 20 years ago, we had 30 channels of television. And we had newspapers and magazines and the radio. And that was the game, right? The internet didn't exist. How many people here remember when the internet did not exist? Raise your hands. There's some youngsters in here. What the internet has done, and then the products built on top of it, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and on, has created a supply and demand issue. There's not that many more people, yet there's that many more people vying for people's attention. and saying that they're this or they're that. And so we have a supply and demand issue. To be great now, you have to be better than you used to be, because in the old days, there were people that decided who were gonna be the people we cared about. They put them on television. They allowed them to write for the newspaper. They were the kingmakers. The kingmakers have lost that power, and now the internet is the kingmaker, and what we all have the ability to do is put out stuff. Except, that sounds all great, and that sounds so exciting, but the flip side is, so does everybody else. And so we have to differentiate, and we have to provide value. And to me, the way what I've watched, and I've watched this for a long time, the number one way for you to break out and actually win, and no matter what you do, is to give first and use that leverage. And so if you look, I watched the hashtag of this event starting last night and even on my flight this morning. And then I saw a bunch of people, and I didn't know a lot of you, and I knew you were here because you were using the hashtag. So then I did my normal fun little thing that I like to do, and then I started looking at your accounts and looking at your business accounts. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people in this room that are in the right hook business. Every post on your Facebook accounts and every second post on your Twitter accounts is something in your best interest. You don't give a f about the people that follow you. You want something, and you're providing nothing in return. There is a really interesting audacity / entitlement going on in entrepreneurship right now in America. Let me tell you something about building a business. You're not entitled to dick. You're not. Just because you started a business and you have something to sell, you are not entitled to anything. The consumer's gonna decide if they want it or not. And by the way, even if you've been successful for a little while, you still have to be great again and again. And what you did for me 2 days ago becomes completely irrelevant. And so I highly, highly recommend that a lot of people start adjusting their overall business philosophy, and then that gets into the execution of how you're putting out content on all these platforms of some sort of variation of providing value, whether you're curating links from other places that are interesting information. I mean, if you're reading information and you find it to be good, you should put it out there. It is not your competitive advantage that you read something on the internet. Somebody else is gonna read it too. There's this notion of like the information is your competitive. Information has never been less valuable than it is today. You know why? It's at your fingertip. Who's the 13th president of the United States? I don't know. This old It is literally never been less valuable to be book smart. It has never been less valuable than right this second to be informational smart. This is what my big problem is with the education system. We're teaching our kids to memorize stuff that they have on their phones. It's ludicrous. So, it has never been, so please, don't think the information you're reading, and the reason I'm painting you this picture is I want to give you guys the easiest way to bring value to your community. The easiest way to bring value to your community is to be a DJ, not a songwriter. Songwriting is hard. Producing original content and original thoughts is very difficult. Consuming content and then deciding what's good and being the DJ to your community by adding a word or two to put it into context to your world and then passing it on is the lightest weight to relevance right now within the social web, and I highly, highly pay attention. You should look at a guy by the name of Jason Hirschhorn. He has an email newsletter that I think does this the best, and I think doing it for social is a very good play, one that is the lightest weight for you to be able to do it. So, you know, to me, I'm a basic economics guy, supply and demand. Supply and demand, right? Right now, we have a lot of supply of information and products and services, and just because you do it doesn't mean you're gonna get anything. And it's gonna get way worse, because every single youngster right now is vying and looking at entrepreneurship as a dramatically more interesting value proposition than going to school for 4 years, collecting $250,000 in debt, and then trying to go get a $40,000 job. As that continues to happen, we'll have even more voices. And guess what? I was phenomenal at 17. I was a real businessman already. I was already making $4,000 or $5,000 a weekend selling baseball cards when I was 12 years old. I knew how to run a business. I'm not underestimating any 17-year-old, 22-year-old, 21-year-old. Just because they're young doesn't mean they don't bring value to the conversation. And they have advantages that the technology and how we deliver information is something they're dramatically more native to than a lot of their competition in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. So we have some really fundamental, massive culture shifts in our society, and I'm gonna tell you right now, with all due respect to all of you in this room, including myself, we're all underestimating it. We are all underestimating what's coming. The amount of technology shifts, the way that we're gonna have to sell our products and services are going to massively shift over the next half decade. I mean, guys, there's drones about to deliver to your house. I mean, do you understand that? I mean, people are grossly underestimating how we're gonna reach people. I mean, how many people here watch television when they want to? Meaning, don't raise it yet, meaning, but thank you for some feisty people in here. Meaning, when you watch your favorite television show, let's eliminate sports and like the results show of The Voice. Let's eliminate live events. How many people here now watch TV when they want to watch it? On HBO on the go, on demand, DVR. How many people watch your favorite show when you want to watch it, not when it actually airs? Raise your hands. Higher. I want to get a sense. Okay, 85%. How many of those people have fast-forwarded every single television commercial this year? Hold them up. Can you guys hold them up? I want the front rows to look back. I want everybody to get a sense of this number. So we're talking about 80% of the 80%. We're talking about an industry that is a $60 billion industry, television commercials, of brands trying to reach you to sell you product. Yet, in 2014, instead of 2003, we're in a world, in 10 years, we're in a world where it has collapsed as a viable place to storytell to you because you are fast forwarding through it. And even if you're lucky enough to get your commercial through to somebody, every person in here, the second they're watching something and the commercial comes on, goes and grabs their phone. So it's not just about the impression, it's about the attention. So not only did you not see the commercial the far majority of time, but the other times that you saw the commercials, you didn't pay attention to them. And so we need to figure out how to get people to pay attention. Just because, you think when somebody goes on a website and your pop-up ad pops up on them, right? Do you think they're necessarily paying attention to that? Do you think you're giving them a good experience? You may collect their email and you may see great conversion funnel, right? But you might not be bringing them the most value that you possibly can. Now you've got to try them both. I understand why it works, but I also am asking you in a world where open email rates have gone from 25 to 13% in the last 3 years to start understanding we, as individuals, do not want to be sold to. And as technology gets better, we're going to be more difficult to get a hold of. And the way to actually get a hold of us is to do it natively. And what I mean by natively is we want to consume things in the way that doesn't stop us from doing what we naturally want to do. We don't want to be put in a place where you're bothering me. And that's why social networks are important. Social networks on your phone, which is where every day more and more of the consumption is happening, all is done natively. All you're doing on your phone, as all of you know, every day is this, right? And what's great about selling in this way is the ad, like on a desktop, is not on the right side like it used to be on Facebook or on a website. It's just in stream. It's native. And if you figure out how to actually make that valuable to people, not just spamming them to buy and make it distracting, you will start figuring out the conversion funnel. By the way, for the short term, there's gonna be plenty of new innovations, but the psychology of selling natively to the way somebody's consuming is going nowhere. It is the way you have to think about going forward. How do I sell? How do I bring value in the habits that are already established by the individual instead of creating them to have new habits that don't come naturally to them? So those are the things I think about. You know, I think about how does that happen? Why does that work? Why was I able to sell tens of thousands of more books on this launch than my prior one? What did Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram do for that? Why did I create Skillshare, SlideShares? Why did I do all these things? It was because I was trying to maximize upfront value to leverage by giving you value, Do you know why you loved your parents? Because they loved you first. And when you start understanding that, you start understanding what I believe is the modern way of doing business. Because the kids, and I'm saying people in this room, 30 and under, 35 and under, they've been marketed to from the beginning. Us older 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, we didn't have that much marketing around us. So our bullshit radars are worse. It's true. Whereas the cynicism of our future customers is at an all-time high, and they're just starting. So I have bad news. Marketing and business got harder. It's going to be harder. And I just want you to realize that. And I want you to realize what really matters, which is providing value. And so I hope you do. Thanks for that. Okay. Now, let's, I know I went very holistic, but I also know that I have the advantage that 85% in this room deeply knows what I'm about and knows what they probably want to ask me. I'm thrilled to take it from that Mother Teresa that I just did to very granular, tactical, or whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go with questions. I'm thrilled. So let's do some Q&A. Raise your hands.
Hey, what's going on? I hope that you enjoyed Gary Vaynerchuk live in San Diego. And what I want to encourage you to do, grab yourself some popcorn, grab yourself a beverage, snuggle in, and get ready for part 2. Because at this point, you've only watched half of this, and part 2 is awesome. We've got lots of really cool Q&A that happens. Gary continues to drop some F-bombs. I'm not sure how many bleeps are in there, but it's a lot. But part 2 is awesome. You don't want to miss that episode. And also, just keep in mind, we would love your feedback. We would love for you to write a top 5-star review. Tell us why you love Life on Fire TV. And then also keep in mind, lifeonfirecontest.com to enter all kinds of cool prizes as well. So there's a couple things you can do there. You can enter and win some great prizes. And be sure to grab yourself a little snack and to watch part 2 with Gary Vaynerchuk. We'll see you soon.
I'm here to help you set your life on fire.